right there. That should be good. Turn the piano down so it's not hitting the keys. Okay. Cool. Stage.
Is that a fine job or is that a fine job?
That is an excellent job.
One day I'll teach a message because I have the photos and everything like that. But the Lord was talking to me about how you can be gifted and have talents and the anointing, but sometimes you got to build your own stage.
He took the leg extenders out of tables, put the tables together, and they were just the right height.
Praise the Lord.
Found some Luan plywood in the school, put those here, taped them to the tables, taped them to each other, made it all one unit, and it's solid.
Standing on the table.
Oh man, I'm on video. They just got.
Oh man,
I can edit that though.
that's great.
Of course, it's live stream, so some people caught it live. I try really hard not to let them catch me doing a jig.
Someday,
You know what I'm talking about.
Well, that Ashley Simpson is.
someday you won't be the editor.
Someday I won't be the editor. And real soon I won't have any creative control over the dancing, and they'll just catch me, and it'll be all over. It'll be on YouTube everywhere. Like, really? Okay, so let's get into this. I am so excited to be here. This is phenomenal. As you know, May 1st is going to be our big launch. The invitations are out there. I'm starting to hit the Facebook and YouTube and all that stuff and really get the excitement and anticipation going. And I love it when you do the Facebook post and then you get 3 or 4 people that share your post. Yeah! It's not the bunny, it's not the, what's the little thing, the YouTube videos that are all goofy? Cat videos. It's not the cat video getting reshared, okay? This is simply an announcement about what we're doing here. So that to me is, I take that kind of personal. So because of that, leading up to that, today's the 10th of April, the Lord spoke to me about 3 specific things that I need to refresh us. And some will be refreshing, some will be new, some will be, it is what it is. So we're gonna do that. So there are 3 things that I'm gonna deal with. This week we're gonna deal with serving. I'll say it that way. We're just gonna deal with serving and the different parameters of serving and what we do. And this will help across the board. It'll help obviously ministry, but it'll help across the board in life. And then next week we're going to get into giving and a proper understanding of what it means to be a giver and what that all entails, tithing, offerings, first fruits, all that stuff. We're going to touch on all of those things and what the new covenant holds for us and how we operate in that. And then we're going to finish up the week before May 1st launch. I'm going to do a message on the vision of Heartland Fellowship and just re-solidify and share everything that the Lord has given us from the beginning and then through this past 9 years of Heartland Fellowship Training Center, what the vision is. And so those are the 3 things the Lord laid on my heart to do. And then I'm still meditating on what in the world He wants me to talk about for May 1st. I'm like, okay, because I know there's a bunch of ministry partners that have already said, we're going to be here, we're going to send our people or either they're going to be here personally or they're going to send their people. I have to touch base with Bishop hopefully today, but I'm expecting Bishop Smith to be able to be here for our morning service and then continue doing his stuff. But I got to touch base and solidify that, nail him down. So anyways, exciting stuff. I'm beyond excited because this to me is one of many manifestations of what God has spoken to me about. This is just a stage. This is just a step, but it's a big step. It's kind of those steps that when you take a step, it's not just the climb, but you get a little higher and you can see a little bit better where you're going when you take a step. So every time we take a next step, it's another boost to our faith. So, okay, today we're going to talk about serving. And that's everybody gets excited about serving, doesn't they?
No. Not at all.
Everybody gets excited.
Not even close.
So this is what the Lord spoke to me about. Today I want to talk about serving from a place of changing your perspective. Okay? We want to serve and serve from a position of, I have to change my perspective about this because if I don't, this is going to be annoying, this is going to be laborsome, this is going to be something I don't want to do, right? What do we say about jobs? If you work at a job, if you create your own industry and you work at a job that you've created, right? Something you love to do, even if you didn't create it, but you love doing that job, what does the world say? You'll never actually work a day in your life. Okay? The point being is that you're doing something that you love, and so the work itself isn't laborsome. In fact, that's what Solomon is really echoing in Ecclesiastes, that it's enough for man to enjoy. I love the way he phrases it, but he says it's enough for man to enjoy all the useless or fruitless days of his life on this earth. So he couches the fact that you should be happy about the fact that you're just doing stuff until you die. I don't know if that's great. But anyways, I love the fact that he just says, enjoy your work. It's enough for us to enjoy what we're doing. So if we don't change our perspective about serving, then it's always going to be a frustrated thing. In fact, we have a misunderstanding of certain terms, and obviously I like to bring out a lot of terms when I teach, because that in and of itself is a teaching. But the word wicked, I always liken that to a wick, a candle wick, or a wicker chair. Have you ever seen it? What does it do with a wicker? It's woven together, or a wick is twisted together. So when you think of wickedness or wicked, you think of something being twisted. Okay? It's not straight. It's not what it was originally created to be. Okay? Evil, on the other hand, if you do a Greek etymology of that word, the root word of evil is literally to toil or to be full of labor. So when we think of evil, we think of certain people or certain activities and things like that. But I'm going to tell you today that serving or working, whether you're serving and honoring the Lord with it, or you're working at a job and doing something like that, if you're doing it in such a way that it's laborsome and annoying, it literally uses one of the words, annoyances. Full of labors, annoyance. That's literally evil. So when the Lord cursed Adam in the beginning, actually, he allowed the curse because Adam did it himself. It wasn't that the Lord's like, yeah, I just want to punish you and beat on you. He's like, no, you chose this. I warned you not to do it. You chose this. So listen, here's your curse. What's the curse for Adam in the beginning in the garden? You're going to continue to work the ground, but now it's going to produce thorns and thistles. By the sweat of your brow will you gain the fruit. Okay? So the reality is, and a lot of people look at that, and we were connected with a group years and years ago that called work a four-letter word. And in fact, it caused us some issues. I did some issues with the IRS myself and had some issues in business because I kind of bought into that for a while. And then I realized, wait a minute, work is not a four-letter word. Work that results in toil instead of happiness. The toil is the four-letter word. If I'm working, that's a good thing. But what am I working at, and am I happy doing it? Am I excited doing it? And if I'm not excited and happy doing it, then I need to shift and get out of it. I need to move on. I need to talk to the Lord and say, all right, Lord, there's two things that need to happen. Either you shift your perspective and He changes your mindset in what you're doing, which we've working on some of that stuff, right? Or He shifts and changes you to a different location. But either way, you have to find the joy and the excitement in that place.
Amen. That's right.
Okay? Otherwise, it's just going to be full of labors and annoyances. And it's literally, when we think of it, we don't think, well, it's evil? Yeah, to work at a job that you don't like, that's evil.
Mm-hmm.
You think of evil as Hitler or Stalin or somebody like that. But the reality is, working at something you don't like to do, that's evil. That's selling out for a paycheck. And what do you really get for that? I don't want to do that, right? A lot of times we're connected with different groups and they'll talk about the difference between rich people and poor people. And rich people, they don't trade hours for dollars. They have a different mindset. And they don't even want to own stuff. They want to just control things. They want to control the money. They don't necessarily want to own the money. It's a totally different mindset, okay? It's because they're doing what they enjoy, not having to have those things control them. So, a few things that I want to touch on today in dealing with this, okay? And we had a baby crash back there, I think. It'd be all right.
That sounds like it. He bounces.
This is one of the phrases, so we're talking about changing our perspective, okay? And I want to deal with a couple areas, but here's a phrase I want to give you right at the beginning. It may not be your calling or your area, but it may be your responsibility for the season. Some of the times that we have difficulty in what we're doing and serving is because we go, that's not my calling, that's not my area. But the Lord's calling us into that for a season. Why? Because we need to, here's the thing that I wrote down. Direct or indirect, we're overseers. This is a body called to raise up leaders. So as leaders, we have to step into areas and, I like this, we have to establish a thing and demonstrate and set the tone for it. It may not be our area. It may not be anything that we want to do. Okay, there are certain things I definitely don't want to do. Do I like doing drywall, Ken? But when we worked on your basement, I stepped in and we did the drywall because it needed to be done. We needed to work on it. So we did it. And I've actually gotten better at doing it and more efficient at it. So I hate it less. Let's say that because I was going to say I like it more. No, I still like it. But I hate it less. Okay? My point being is that it was something that was placed in front of me and I dove into it. I talked about this stage. I found the materials here. And I said, okay, what's in front of me? What can I do with this? How can I use this? How can I put this in play and make this work for me? Okay? Now, what I did was I took the talent and skills that I have and I applied it to different styles of materials. Ken and I talked about it. I was going to build this and do this and do this. Well, you know what? I took what was here and I used it. And what the Lord wants us to do is take what we have in front of us and maximize it and do efficiency. And here's one of the keys to this. And we'll get into this. I'm going to go upside down in my notes, but go to, let's go to the Hebrews 13 one. And what I want you to get, I'll give you this first note. It was the last one on here, but the Lord's flipping it up on me. So here's the thing. One thing about serving, I want you to get above all, above everything, is that you're sowing into your future. When you serve, you are sowing into your future. Most people don't get that when they serve, and because of our perspective, because of our mindsets, we're in a place either that we don't want to be in, okay? And the Lord's saying, I want you there. I've called you to be there for this season. And you're like, I don't want to be here. I don't want to work at Home Depot. I'm ready to be out of there, man. But the Lord says, I still need you to be here for a season or for a little bit longer. And you go, all right, then you got to change my heart and my perspective about this. Okay? Why? Because you're sowing into your leadership. How you relate to those you serve directly affects how those who are eventually supposed to serve under you honor you. Now, I don't know about you, but I worked really hard over the years at honoring those that I worked for. Did I do it perfect? No. But I worked really hard at honoring those that I worked for. Just the little thing, not just the big things. You know, Paul talked about it and he said, he was talking to slaves and he said, don't just do your things in front of people, in front of your masters when their eye is on you, is what he said. But he says, in fact, he says, when their eye is on you to win their favor, he said, but do it all the time. So there are little things that I do that could be generational, it could be whatever it is, but I like to say yes, sir. I like to say no, sir. I like to say yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. It's not even an older thing or a younger thing. Some people will say, I'll say yes, ma'am. Don't call me ma'am. I'm not a ma'am. That's, you know. And I'm like, it's not indicative of your age. It's an honor. Exactly. So anyways, they're just little things in how you approach people, how you communicate with people. I remember years ago, Grandpa Gibbs did it, and I'll never forget it. But I was sitting at the table and Grandpa Gibbs was talking, and I didn't value all the time what he was sharing with me. But I was listening to him, and I'm sitting at the table, and I'm young, I'm just a kid, and he's talking, and all of a sudden, and he loved to do this, he would hit the table. He had man hands, all right? He wasn't a big guy, but he had man hands from working the farm. I mean, they were big hunks of leather with steel inside them. So he would take, and I had this huge oak table. It was an oak table, wasn't it, Mom? It's a big, huge oak table. And he would just, every once in a while, he'd get excited about the Lord, or he'd want to drive a point home, and he'd just, wham, hit that table. And I mean, it was, us probably hurt us. Him, he's hurting the table, that big oak table. But anyways, I'm sitting there, Grandpa's talking, and Grandpa, I'm doing this. And he hit that table, and he says, Jeremy, when a man talks to you, look him in the eye. And I went, yes, sir. Yes, sir. And I went, okay. And so that set me straight for the rest of my life. Because now I'll be in a conversation with somebody and I will consciously, it'll come to me consciously, and I'll go, I need to look you in the eye. I need to connect with you. That's just a little thing of honor. Those are the little things. So when I'm talking about honoring leadership, it's not about, hey, let me do this for you, or do that thing to be seen. But it's the little things that culminate into a life. Because when you have somebody serving under you, you want them to be able to come up to you and communicate with you and articulate what they're saying and look in the eye and be straight with you. So that's the way you project it. So the first thing I wanted to get is sowing. So let's read this. This is Hebrews 13, verse 17. Most of you know this, but I'm going to have Pastor Ken read this scripture just to solidify this point. Even though I'm touching on the sowing part, which is Galatians chapter 6, verse 7 and 8, is, don't be deceived, God is not mocked. Whatever a man sows, that's what he's going to reap. That's verse 6. And then 7 and 8 talks about sowing generously and reaping generously, sowing little and reaping little. But go ahead with this. Hebrews 13, 17.
Obey those who rule over you and be submissive, for they watch out for your souls, and those who must give an account. Let them do so with joy and not with grief, but that would be unprofitable for you.
I'm talking about sowing from that verse. What's the first part we generally get hung up on? Obey those who rule over you. Okay, all right. No. There's a key here. And be submissive, for they watch out for your souls as those who must give an account. I have to give an account of those that I'm taking care of, that God has made me overseer. In fact, there are people that I have to give account for, and they're not even here. I'm like, Lord, they're not even actively here doing what they're supposed to be doing, and you still said I'm an overseer over them? Yeah, I'm holding you accountable. Well, what am I supposed to do? He goes, do what's the most important thing. You better be praying for them. And keeping your heart clean, since they haven't been showing up, and haven't been doing anything, and haven't been supporting anything. Keep your heart ready for when they come back, that you receive them without bitterness and resentment. But you receive them, I go, okay, all right. So that's part of my responsibility. And then what's the next part? Let them do so with joy and not grief, for that would be it would be unprofitable, for that would be unprofitable for you. And then NIV says, that would be of no advantage to you. And so we look at that and go, okay, what's the unprofitability or the disadvantage to making it difficult for leadership? I'm sowing into my ministry. I'm sowing into what I'm going to do. Okay? Therefore, I want to make sure that they're happy. Even when my leaders in the church and in the work environment were wrong, it bothered me that I couldn't always make that right. Even when they were wrong. Definitely when I was wrong, I'm sorry. What can I do? I apologize. Misunderstanding. Let me communicate, right? But when they were wrong, even then I said, man, you know what? I don't want to make your work hard. I don't want it to be anything but a joy and keep some grief away from you. Because that's not advantageous to me. That's unprofitable to me. So as we're doing this, I'm hammering on this idea of what we're sowing into. Because what we sow into is what we're going to reap. And this area of leadership, the Lord, you think about it. How do you relate with your leaders? Work environment, non-work environment, whatever it is. At a certain point, you're going to have people relating to you. I don't want it to be a pain. You want it to be a pain? I want to enjoy it. So you get this point. The first thing we're going to talk about, changing our perspective, is listen. I'm not serving you or honoring you because you're right, because you're doing everything right, but this is the position that I'm in at this moment. Either I'm working a secular job or I'm I'm serving. I don't want to do that. We had a discussion a couple months ago, and I said, I'm going to need you guys to possibly do this and do that. And all three went, I don't want to do that, but okay, if it needs to be done, I guess we'll do it. So okay, so we can work with that, because at least that's pliable, right? You get my point. We're sowing into our future. Change your perspective on that. I'm not doing this for them. You are, but I'm doing this because eventually I'll be them. It's like that whole phrase when we talk about the man. I'm just fighting the man. Better watch out, because one day you'll be the man, and somebody will be fighting against you just for the simple fact of your position, not because you're doing anything right or wrong. I don't want to be there. Good?
Good.
Okay, next point. And I want to just touch on this, and then we're going to go to Luke 10. So get ready. We're going to go to Luke 10. Responsibility. Again, I said this, that it may not be your calling or your area, but it may be at this season something God's calling you to be responsible for. It may not be my calling, it may not be my area, and you can say this within yourself. Listen, that ain't my calling, that ain't my area, but it's my responsibility. It's my responsibility right now. Okay? I set up the stage, I set up all the music equipment, I set up the camera. My wife got to do the hard job of hitting the click button to go live. Okay? I set all that up, right? That's not my area. I've done soundboards, right? But I'm supposed to be teaching, sitting, and I'm not even supposed to be all the time leading worship. There's supposed to be a team that does that, and I'll sit in every once in a while. But I'm going to set the tone, and guess what? Nobody else is here right now. So I'll do it right now. It may not be my area, but it's something that I need to do. Responsibility. So write this down, and those of you that have been with me, you know this. Responsibility is the ability to respond. It's your response ability. So I want you to change your perspective on that. Is if you have the ability in a situation, then you might want to check and see if you're supposed to respond. If you don't have the ability, then walk away. It's not yours. But if you have the ability, in fact, it says it in James, he talks about it, he says, you say to a person, go, I wish you well, keep warm and well fed, and you do nothing for them. And he's talking to people that have the ability to do something for them. He said, what good is that? Right? If you have the ability. If you don't have the ability, it's not your responsibility. I know people that have put themselves in places of heavy, heavy burden. Talked with them, counseled with them, right? They come up and they go, Apostle Jeremy, I've been dealing with this and dealing with that. My kids are all the time, and they're doing this and they're doing that. I said, let them be responsible. There's one gal, we love her. She comes up to me on a regular basis and just touches. When we're over at that congregation, she'll come up and she'll go, just keep praying for me. I'm doing better. They were over the other day, grandkids and kids. I just worked all day. I walk in the door, and it's like, here, take care of everybody. I don't have time to take care of everybody. So she's getting it out, and I'm like, well, make them take care of themselves. She's like, I'm trying, So, but again, a responsibility. So in Luke chapter 10, let's go ahead and read that. It's a pretty quick read, isn't it? It's quite long. Yeah, let's go ahead.
And behold, a certain lawyer stood up and tested him, saying, Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? He said to him, What is written in the law? What is your reading of it? So he answered and said, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength, with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. And he said to him, You have answered rightly. Do this, and you will live. But he, wanting to justify himself, said to Jesus, And who is my neighbor? Then Jesus answered and said, A certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell among thieves, who stripped him of his clothing, wounded him, and departed, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a certain priest came down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by the other side. Likewise a Levite, when he arrived at the place, came and looked, and passed by on the other side. But a certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. So he went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine, and he set him on his own animal, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. On the next day, when he departed, he took out 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper, and said to him, Take care of him, and whatever more you spend, when I come again, I will repay you. So which of these 3 do you think was neighbor to him who fell among the thieves? And he said, He who showed mercy on him. Then Jesus said to him, Go and do likewise.
Go and do likewise. So we know this story. Most of us good Bible students know the story of the Good Samaritan. Even non-church people know the Good Samaritan. There's Good Samaritan hospitals and Good Samaritan this and Good Samaritan that, charity organizations and all sorts of stuff because they take this example. Now, in the example, we have a priest and a Levite. Now, if you have any historical understanding, the Levites were the priests. So Jesus calls out a priest who was actually a Levite as well. But we're gonna assume that because he could have been talking about a false priest, but I mean, he's talking about the Jewish people, okay? So we're going to assume that there's the priest, that's a Levite automatically, and then a Levite. So we have somebody who's serving in the office of a priest, okay? And then we have somebody who's a Levite, not serving in the office of a priest, but he's still in the priesthood, because all the Levites were called to be priests, whether they were serving at that time. So we can safely assume, we can say somebody who's standing in the office and somebody who's supposed to be standing in their office. Those are the two people Jesus calls out, right? And then the interesting thing is, he says, then a Samaritan came by. Now, if you understand anything about Samaritans, Samaritans were half-breeds. That's generally how they were viewed. They were a lower class of Jewish people because they were interracially mixed, okay? So they were not as accepted. In fact, there's other accounts in the Gospels where some Samaritans, Jesus deals with a Samaritan woman at the well. We know that story, right? And she even says to him, I'm a Samaritan woman and you're a Jew. How can you talk to me? How can you ask me for anything, right? So there was definitely this cultural classism going on there, okay? So when Jesus points out the Samaritan, you've got to understand there's a huge dynamic. You've got the priests, the leaders, okay? Then you've got the Levites, who's a Levite who's supposed to be a priest and a leader. And he says the one who did the right thing was this half-breed who's despised, especially by the priests and leaders, but also by everybody else. He's the one who took care of this guy. Now, here's the key that I wanted everybody to get. The man answers in verse 37, and he says, he who showed mercy on him. Who's the one that was his neighbor? No, this is the key phrase. This is just talking about being a neighbor. This is not talking about being righteous in the kingdom. This is not talking about being a good Christian. This is talking about being a neighbor. A neighbor picks up the guy who got the tar beat out of him, bandages him, cleans his wounds, then bandages him, pours on the oil and wine, takes him to the hospital, basically, takes him to the inn, drops some cash on him and says, take care of him, and when I come back through, if I need to cover any more of his tab, I'll take care of it then. That's what a neighbor does. And I go, okay, our perspective of service generally doesn't cover that. I don't know about you. Again, this is all predicated, I want to make sure everybody understands, this is all predicated on your response ability, your ability to respond, okay? Obviously, the Samaritan had some cash, had some foreknowledge how to clean a wound, okay? Had some oil and water with, it was oil and wine, right? Oil and wine with him, right? He had some provision. If you don't have the provision, what can you do? You do what you can do, right? I built this stage because this material was here. You get what I'm saying? So you do what you can do with what you have. So your responsibility, we'll learn the model of the Good Samaritan. Not every one of us could pick him, but we could do something, right? In fact, they have Good Samaritan rules in this country, okay? Where if you come across, if you view an accident, you're required by law to stay there to give your testimony. And if you come across somebody that's injured and you don't take care of them, you can be held criminally responsible for not tending to them. There's a Good Samaritan rules, okay? So that's how important this is. So what is getting to the end here, we need to change our mindset about serving when we understand mercy. And I gave Mom this definition the other night. But mercy is kindness or goodwill, we think, okay, towards the miserable. That's what mercy is. Kindness or goodwill towards the miserable and the afflicted, joined with a desire to help them. It's joined with a desire to help them. It's not just goodwill and like, all right, I guess I got to take care of you because you're, messed up. No, there's some desire. You're like, okay, you know what? And the reason you get the desire aspect is because you change your perspective and go, you know what? If I was in that position, if I was overtaken by thieves and had the tar beat out of me, I'd want somebody to come to my aid. I'd want somebody to help me. And so when we're looking at serving, especially ministry-wise, because ministry can be thankless. Ministry can be, at times, a pretty good burden. because you don't always get paid. In fact, not only do you not get paid, but a lot of times you're the giver, sowing seed, right? Your offerings. And then you're asked to sow your time as well and to serve, and you're going, but that's not my area. That's not my thing, man. So there's a balance. I know, Ken, we were talking with Ken about at work, some people like to disappear
Oh, yeah.
from their positions. And for a while, he's feeling this burden because he is able to respond, even though it's not necessarily his area. So he had to learn, all right, I got to find the balance in my ability to respond versus whether I'm supposed to respond. And where's the balance? Because just because you left your post doesn't mean I have to pick up the slack because you left. Because the more you do that, and the more I do that, the more you will do that.
Yep.
See, if I pick up the slack because you took off, you'll keep taking off. But if I go, you know what, I'm going to do what is not even what's necessary, but I'm going to go keep going above and beyond. But I'm not going to go totally above and beyond, right? I'm only going to go so far above and beyond, and then I'm going to say, okay, that's my limit, because you'll take away my ability to do what I'm supposed to be doing if I respond to everything. So again, it's our ability to respond. So there is a level of responsibility that we have, but it's not for everything, but it is for some things. So we need to go through our lives and assess, is that my responsibility? I have the ability, but am I supposed to respond? And then there's other things where the Lord's saying to you, I know there's certain things in all of our lives where the Lord's saying, I need you to respond to that. Lord, I don't know if I have the ability for that. He goes, the fact that I told you I need you to respond to it tells you got the ability. I'll give you the strength to do it, right? Now put a smile on your face. You know, do what you got to do. I mean, there are all sorts of tools and mechanisms, man. Put your headphones on, put something happy on, and go do that thing, right? There was something in the bathroom the other day, and I'm like, really? And I'm like, okay. And I just grabbed the paper towel and cleaned it all up, and I'm like, I can respond to that. You know, one day I'll have a janitorial staff, and they can take care of this stuff. But here's the thing. I remember listening to Joyce Myers years ago, and she was talking about the Lord teaching her and growing her in her faith. And she said the Lord would do it in little things. She would be in the parking lot, and he would say, put that cart up. Don't just leave your grocery cart in the middle of the parking area. Put it in the cart corral. And she's going back and forth. She's going, Lord, I don't have time for this type of stuff. You know, I don't. And he's going, put the cart up. In fact, grab those two other carts that are right near your cart and put them all up. Right? And what did it teach her? It taught her to serve when nobody was looking. It taught her to do. There are certain things when nobody's looking that we look at it and go, do I want to pick up that piece of paper off the floor? In fact, I got into a mode for a long time where I would pick stuff up at the wrong time. I go in my room, shut most everything down, turn the music on, and I'm walking, and all of a sudden I'm seeing stuff on the floor. And now I want to pick it up. In other words, like, that's a distraction right now. When you get done praying, now you can go back and pick that up. You know, because I get done praying and be like, oh. He's like, remember that piece of paper that you had to pick up right then? Go pick it up now. And I'm like, now? So that's how we are, right? When we're doing something over here, we want to, oh, I should tend to that. And he goes, stop it. And then when we're not doing anything important, we go, you could do that all day. And he goes, oh, you care? It was so vitally important that we do it then. But now, so you understand our responsibility. It's our ability to respond. Next point I want to get to is obedience. And I want to tie obedience with patience. And then I'm going to finish up with knowing. So in 1 Samuel chapter 15, we have the story of Samuel. And we're just going to read a couple verses there. But the context is that Saul has already been rejected as king. Okay? And he's still under charge of the Lord. Go ahead, Pastor Ken, verse 22.
So Samuel said, Has the Lord a great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices, as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed than fat of rams. For rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as iniquity and idolatry, because you have rejected the word of the Lord. He also has rejected you from being king.
So here's King Saul. He was charged by the Lord through Samuel to go in and attack this certain area, and he was told to wipe it out. Just destroy everything, okay? So what they did was they went in there and they destroyed everything that was worthless. They captured the king, and they captured all the good stuff, all the good livestock, right? The cattle and the sheep and everything like that, and they're going to make a sacrifice now, right? Well, we captured all the good stuff. We're going to sacrifice it to the Lord. Now, on the surface, you would think, well, if they killed it there, or they killed it as a sacrifice, what's the difference? Because we don't have a real concept of sacrifice today. Here's the key. What you don't realize in the scriptures is that Old Testament sacrifices, a lot of times, were consumed by the ones who made the sacrifice. So you would go and you would make a sacrifice at the temple, okay, with your family. You would sacrifice a bull or a goat, right? Whatever it is. And generally, the priest would come by and take a portion of it for themselves. But the vast majority of the whole sacrifice, you and your family ate it right then. Okay? So picture you take your cow to the sacrifice place. You sacrifice it, right? You cook it up. The priest comes by and he says, "I'd like a little chunk of the tenderloin if I can get some of that," right? And you go, "Sure, have at it," because there's plenty of tenderloin. I'll have some too. And there's still some good T-bones and some other steak in there, and there's some other good cuts. So yeah, have at it, right? And there's a roast over here, and there's some burger. We got some burger. You get me? So when they're talking about in this, and he says, "Well, we saved all these good animals so we could sacrifice them to the Lord." The reality is they're going to sacrifice it to the Lord as an offering, and then they were going to feast on it. Okay? Because all the priests were not going to eat all that stuff. Right? They were going to eat it. That's one of the, I don't want to say the dirty little secret, but I guess it's one of the dirty little secrets about sacrificing and stuff like that, is that a lot of times there was a selfish motive. Well, I'll sacrifice this unto the Lord. Yeah, because you're only going to give a little bit of it to the priest, and you're going to take the rest of it and eat it yourself. So, so you get this. So they're like, "We saved the best." And so Samuel shows up and he said, "The Lord told you to wipe this all out." And he says, "Well, but we're offering a sacrifice." And he says, "Does the Lord delight in sacrifice and burnt offerings as much as he does obedience?" Breathe in wrong. So my point in this, in obedience, and we'll touch on chapter 13 in the patience area, but the idea of obedience and what we've got to get about this is there's a lot of times and a lot of scenarios and a lot of situations when we're serving that it's easy to sacrifice something. And it's much harder to be obedient. It's much easier to sacrifice than it is to be obedient. Well, I'll just give up doing that. Was that what the Lord told you to do? Well, you follow me? I know as I'm saying that, there's some things you're thinking about. You're like, "Yeah, I can give that up. I can do this. I can do that." Right. But is that what the Lord told you to do? And I say it this way, it's a lot easier to sacrifice than it is to obey. But the reality is, it's actually, in the spirit realm, it's the flip side. It's easier to obey, and it's usually harder to sacrifice. I said this before a couple months ago, where we talked about how we want to crawl on our hands and knees to that special place of holiness and, praise the Lord there, right? And he's telling us to walk across the street and hug somebody. And we think, "I'm going to make that sacrifice. I'm going to go over there and do that special thing." And he's going, "Just put up with that person that's in your life right now that you don't like. Start liking them on purpose. Start being nice to them." And you're like, "Well, but, Mom was dealing with work, and she's like, I could just quit." Well, that's technically a sacrifice, isn't it? You're just quitting. I'm going to sacrifice that income for the sake of keeping peace and just walking away from that environment, my own peace, the peace where I'm not in the position of being the target of that behavior. I'm gonna sacrifice that thing and just walk out, right? That's what I'm talking about as far as we rationalize in our mind sacrifice, right? But the obedience is, no, stay there. I have you as a light there. I want you to do that work. And then we look at it and go, well, that is a sacrifice. Okay, but it's different. You understand, it's a different type of thing. So Samuel rebukes Saul and he says, the Lord doesn't delight in that type of sacrifice. It's a disobedient thing. In fact, I wanted to point this out too. For this rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as iniquity and idolatry. Now, a lot of us in the church have been talked to about rebellion. But the church doesn't like to talk a lot about stubbornness. And how Samuel just related it to iniquity and idolatry. There's a lot of people that are stubborn and don't even won't even acknowledge that they're stubborn. Listen, sweetheart, you just trashed that relationship because you are so stubborn and set in your doctrines and your theology and your worldview that you can't accommodate somebody for a moment in order to win the relationship. He who wins souls is wise. Doesn't mean when you run out there and you've prayed a prayer with 15 people that all of a sudden you have an inherent wisdom. It means that when you truly win their soul, wisdom is flowing out of you. Okay? So there's an inherent wisdom flowing out of you because of the Lord. And so it causes you to win people. And when it says win souls, see, they twist it all around and go, well, if I get a bunch of converts, then it shows that I have wisdom. No, it says if you win souls, you're wise. It demonstrates wisdom. So again, when we're talking about this in obedience, we flipped back to, let's go back to chapter 13. A lot of people don't talk about stubbornness, but I tell you, there's a lot of stubbornness in us and in the church. We don't want to. One of my sons, whom I love all my children, but he has a stubborn streak. So there are times when he doesn't want to do things, and it seems like to a number of us that he's being obstinate on purpose. I don't know if he can give out an amen for that.
Is that you?
Don't look like it.
Apparently not.
He's nodding his head. He's nodding his head. For those of you off camera, my son is acknowledging that streak in him. Yes. So, but there's a lot of people in the church that don't want to acknowledge that stubbornness. Like, I got this figured out. Well, listen, honey, knowledge has actually puffed you up. But love seeks to build up people. So as long as you want to stay puffed up in your knowledge and stubborn in it, well, no, this is what I believe, and this is the way it is, and this is the... Okay, that's the way you believe today, and maybe for the last 5 years. But the 20 years previous to that, you were oblivious. So why are you acting like you're all got it figured out now, right? Paul wrote to the Corinthians, he said, a man who thinks he knows something does not yet know as he ought to know. But it's enough that he loves God and is known by God. Well, the minute I think I've got it figured out, that's when I need to stop, take a step back, and go, all right, Lord, I'm going to reassess the whole thing again. I've said this before on many of my teachings, that if you're not willing to destroy your beliefs in the process of knowing the Lord more, then your beliefs are really no greater than Santa Claus or the Easter Bunny. You've got to be willing to challenge that. Why? Because at the end of the day, that knowledge can puff you up. Your experiences can taint the next experience. You want to come from a pure position and say, all right, Lord, no matter what I've experienced and what I've gone through, I have to trust you today to lead me. And if that means chucking the whole thing, I'm willing to do that. Again, it's that idea of Abraham with his son Isaac on the mountain. Am I willing to sacrifice that which I have, that was promised to me, that I've been believing God for all this time? Am I willing to sacrifice it? Or not? Get that? So with that, the obedience, here comes the patience, and here's Samuel in Samuel 13, and we're talking about patience, and I want to see verse, let's see. Let's go with verse 13 and 14.
And Samuel said to Saul, you have done foolishly. You have not kept the commandment of the Lord your God, which he commanded you. For now the Lord would have established your kingdom over Israel forever. But now your kingdom shall not continue. The Lord has sought for himself a man after his own heart, and the Lord has commanded him to be commander over his people, because you have not kept what the Lord commanded you.
Read verse 10 and 11.
Now it happened as soon as he had finished presenting the burnt offering that Samuel came.
All right, stop there. Okay, so here's the scenario, if you're not familiar with Samuel 13, 1 Samuel 13, okay? Saul is with his troops, and they conquered. But they were under a mandate or a directive, a command from Samuel, from the prophet Samuel, to wait until he showed up. He said, wait 7 days, I'm going to show up, we'll do the sacrifice, we'll honor the Lord, right? So Saul's sitting there, knows it's 7 days comes and goes. Probably like 7 days and 2 minutes. And King Saul reasons in his mind and looks around and goes, oh, my guys are going to freak out. They're going to leave. They're going to run away if I don't do something right now. So he decides, I'm going to offer the sacrifices myself since Sammy didn't show up, right? I'm going to do it myself. So that's where he says, now, as it happened, it happened as soon as he finished presenting the burnt offering. As soon as he was done.
That Samuel came, and Saul went out to meet him, that he might greet him. And Samuel said, what have you done? Saul said, when I saw that the people were scattered from me, and that you did not come within the days appointed, and that the Philistines gathered together at Michmash, then I said, the Philistines will now come down on me at Gilgal, and I will have not made supplication to the Lord. Therefore I felt compelled and offered a burnt offering. And Samuel said to Saul, you have done foolishly. You have not kept the commandment of the Lord your God, which he commanded you. For now the Lord would have established your kingdom over Israel forever. But now your kingdom shall not continue. The Lord has sought for himself a man after his own heart, and the Lord has commanded him to be commander over his people, because you have not kept what the Lord commanded you.
So the idea here, I want you to get, and the whole reason we're touching on this passage is because King Saul obviously had a problem with obedience. That's obvious. Here's 2 commands in chapter 13, chapter 15. Problems with obedience. Problems with listening and just following the command. Okay? It's enough that we get into a place where we start hearing the command. That's an area right there. But once we get in there and the Lord says something to us, what are we doing with it? The key that I want you to see in this passage is he couldn't wait. And that's where we get into trouble sometimes. We're like, oh, well, I have the responsibility. And they didn't show up on time. And you see his explanation. Pastor Ken just read the explanation. He's like, well, the people were scattering, and then the Philistines were to come down, and there was all this, and you didn't show up, so I had to do it, man. I had to take care of business. We're good. It's like he walked out, and he's like, hey, Sammy, you were late, bro. I took care of it, man. I'm good, okay? Because the people were scattering, and the Philistines were coming, and everybody was messing around, but we got it covered, right? We're good. He goes, no, you acted foolishly. You couldn't wait. Listen, if I tell you I'm going to be somewhere, and I get delayed, and I tell you I'm going to do it, you need to just relax and let me do it. One of the tests we're going to do when we have our different classes that come in to the training center is we're going to perform what we call the Simon Peter test. And it's going to tie in with Saul here. And one of the things we're going to do, and this will be streaming so people will have a clue when they come, but anyways, is at random, one of the classes, the teacher is going to be late. And what that means is the class is supposed to be there at a certain time, they're going to show up, and they're going to sit. And we're going to wait and watch from afar and see if somebody in the class gets up and starts doing something. Well, I know our teacher's supposed to be here, but maybe I don't know what we're supposed to do. And then we're going to come in. And we're going to go, okay, today's lesson is the Simon Peter test. And the reason we call it Simon Peter is because in Acts chapter 1 and 2, actually in Acts chapter 1, leading to chapter 2, Jesus instructed his disciples to go and wait in the upper room and pray. There was no other instruction but to wait. Right? Nothing. But what happens? Peter says, Judas is dead. We need to appoint somebody to take his place. Right? And if you read the text, he quotes 2 separate scriptures. One scripture he says, let his place remain vacant. And then he quotes another scripture and says, and let another one take his place. What is it? Is it supposed to be vacant or occupied? And then they take and they cast lots, which is pretty much throwing dice, right? They're casting lots. Because you never find that later on, after they're filled with the Holy Spirit, you don't find them doing that ever again. So they're casting lots. So they're trying to figure out, and then the person that they appoint, the lot was cast to, Matthias, you never hear anything of him throughout the scriptures. He's appointed to take Judas's place. You never hear anything. So what's the point? The point is, just like Peter's character, he couldn't just relax and wait. He got antsy. The same thing with King Saul here. Wait 7 days, I'll be there. 7 days, 2 minutes later, I got That's a trap. That's a pitfall when we're serving. Okay? What I want you to understand, I talked a lot about being responsible, able to respond. And we talked about being obedient. Now I'm tempering all of that with being patient. Because there's sometimes you're in situations you're like, well, I could step up and do that, but they said just to wait for them to get here. And everybody else goes, shouldn't we? No. They said they'll handle it. So they must be delayed. It's all good. I watched Elder Richie. I love him. Absolutely love him. He'll keep doing worship. He'll go into prayer. He'll actually start teaching. Okay? Waiting for Bishop to get there. If Bishop was at another service and was traveling back from that service to get to this service, and the service, Elder Richie will start service on time. And if he needs to do things, if he sees somebody in the service, and he'll go, Sister so-and-so is going to come and bless us in her own way. And I love it because he's putting them on the spot, right? And they get up and they go, well, and they'll turn to the piano, the organist, to Pastor Paul, somebody, and they'll go, please. Okay. And so they start, she's like, yeah. So they'll start singing and do it, and they'll still do a special song, right? And you know the look on their faces like, you put me on the spot, right? But they were able to respond. Elder Richie knew they were able to respond, and so he put them on the spot because they could handle it, right? And the point being is, he doesn't panic. He doesn't freak out. He just keeps rolling with it, and we get through it. And then Bishop will get there, and he'll go, everybody stand up and let Bishop's here, and we'll go with that. So you get my point? We're tempering this. You have the ability to respond, and it is your responsibility, but where and at what times? And what's really my responsibility? What am I really supposed to be doing? Because I'm not supposed to do everything. If I was told to wait, and that time comes and passes, you know what? I've said it before. Jesus didn't fall off the throne. There are times when we just need to go, okay, I guess we'll chill, man. We'll be okay, right? So again, you finding the balance. It's difficult in serving, especially in leadership, when we start to make things really rigid. When we start to make things, well, just do this. That's the way we're going to do it. And you go, okay, that may sound great and take the pressure off of you for the moment, because now you don't have to actually think about what you're asking me to do. But the reality is that's not real leadership. Real leadership flows and adjusts and, looks at because real leadership's not in a vacuum. It's out there in the real world, and it doesn't always fit in our nice little bubble. So you getting this? I know you are. Okay, last thing I want to point out is in tempering with this is James chapter 4, verse 17. We'll finish up with this. And I'm going to point out a couple quick things and we'll be done.
Therefore, to him who knows to do good and does not do it, to him it is sin.
Okay, so there's good. You're supposed to do it. If you don't do it, it's sin. What is sin? Hamartia or hamarteno means to miss the mark, right? To err, to not have a share in. So the key I want to point out to this is to him who knows. What do you know? That tempers my obedience, my ability to respond, my level of patience on my knowing, my level of knowing. So what do I know? Okay? I want this to be kind of the pressure on your responsibility, but at the same time, the relief valve on it. Right? Well, I didn't know. Okay. Genuine, honest, okay, good. You didn't respond because you didn't know. Right? On the other hand, did you know? Well, yeah, I knew. Okay. There's the responsibility. You didn't respond, but you knew it needed to be taken care of. Right? So that's what I want to balance this out with, is it comes back to the knowing. To him who knows the good he ought to do and doesn't do it, to him it is sin. Well, there's a lot of times we're being, especially the church mentality is, you should have done that. I should have? Well, you know the good, you should have. We said this to the kids. I used to say it a lot of times to the kids, or I did right in the very beginning, and the Lord began to correct me. I love that, Bubbies. I love you.
You said something too fast.
He's so cute. But I said this to the kids in the beginning because it was said to me at different times. Well, you should know better. Well, the fact that I did it ultimately means that I really don't know better. Because if I truly grasped the depths of what it means to know better, chances are I wouldn't have done it.
Right.
I'm just throwing it out there that, well, you should have known better. Well, if I was in eternity and looked back, you're right. I would have known, hey, don't do that, right? It's like, what's the famous last words?
Hey, watch this.
Hey, watch this. Hey, watch this. Hey, everybody, watch this. Right? You should have known better. Well, obviously they didn't. Otherwise, they wouldn't have done it, okay? So my point on this whole thing is there are certain things that you should do. And if you don't do them, you're missing the mark, okay? You're missing what God wants you to do. But there are other things that you don't know. They're not your responsibility. The church is very good at taking the dogmas and rules and throwing them on people and acting as if, listen, I've been at this for 25, 26 years, okay? And I'm still constantly growing, constantly around. Never stop learning, never stop growing, okay? But 25 years, I can't take 25 years of experience in the Lord and drop it on somebody that came in yesterday. You can't do that. And then turn around and look at them and go, I know you just prayed a prayer with Pastor Ken the other day, but you should know better. And they go, I should? Okay.
Right.
Well, that's your assumption, but I don't think I should. I think I should have an opportunity to grow. And actually, they won't even answer that way because they'll be like,
Huh?
okay, I'm sorry. So we unnecessarily beat them up. So again, it may not be your calling or your area, but it could be your responsibility for a season. Now, we've tempered all that with the obedience and the patience, and whether it's your responsibility, particularly in that area. And we just tempered it again with what do you know? And realize that it's all about sowing. It's all about sowing. The Lord said to Cain, he said, where's your brother? And what's Cain's?
Am I my brother's keeper?
Am I my brother's keeper? That's his. We know that. How many people know that? Well, am I my brother's keeper?
Yes.
Here's the key. The fact that I asked you where he was isn't obvious. It's a big sign on the wall that says, yes, you are at this moment. No, you're not. You don't have to be responsible for his whole life. You don't have to, wipe his nose. You don't have to do all that stuff. But at this moment, when I'm asking you, and in particular because the Lord already knew what he'd done, yes, you are your brother's keeper. So I'm gonna leave you with that idea and that concept today. What is the Lord asking you? I said, if we know the good we ought to do and we don't do it, Tim, it is sin. So what's the Lord asking of you in these different areas? Now, it's going to be simple, may not always be easy, right? There's times when we think the sacrifice, I'm going to prove to the Lord I'm doing this, and the Lord goes, just do that. That's easy. And we go, well, really? I want to do this hard thing because that'll prove. And he goes, I don't need you to do that hard thing. I need you to do this thing over here. And you go, that doesn't, there's just the stubbornness in us. We've got this wrong, we're like, I want to, Jesus, I want to do that. And he goes, stop it. Stop it. Somebody on a text message told me to stop it the other day. It's like, really? You stop it. So what has the Lord called you to be? Who is the brother? Who's the neighbor that the Lord's called you to be a keeper of? Yeah, he hasn't called you to do it to everybody.
That's right.
And as leaders and as serving, we've got to get this because we're sowing into our future. We're sowing into what is next. And if you ever want to be the leader that God has called you to be, you'll get this concept, or these concepts. It's not earth-shattering, but it is grounding, and it's revelatory. It's something that helps to temper us and go, okay, Lord, one day I want to be captain of my industry, or at least want my house to run right. Let's put it that way, right? My house to run right and have a job that I can be happy to go to. Just those little things, let alone 5 to 10,000 liters at a time with 12,000 seat sanctuary and all the multi-purpose and all that stuff that's going on, right?
Right.
So there it is. Good? Amen. Pastor Ken, did you have any comments? You good? I was making sure. Double check. All right.
How do I stop this?
Go up top
Up top.
where it says broadcast.
Okay.
Click on that.
Uh-huh.
It'll show the YouTube in red.
Uh-huh.
Click on it.